welcome back to Circus and Circuit, Unraveling Global Trade podcast. I'm Kate Foronda, podcast author and host, and we continue talking about global economy. It's been almost a month since New York Climate Week came to a close, a time of panels, pledges, and promises that the energy transition is accelerating. Politicians smiled, CEOs posed with solar backdrops, and every press release seemed to end with the same phrase, net zero by 2050. And yet, the Monday after those speeches, oil prices went up. Brent flirted with $92 per barrel. Traders blamed geopolitical uncertainty, and airlines quietly added new fuel surcharges. It felt almost symbolic, as if the market itself was reminding us. Nice conferences, nice discussions, but let's get back to reality. Because the truth is, we haven't just built our economies on oil, we have built our identities around it. From the jets that bring world leaders to climate summits, to data center servers powering AI models, hydrocarbons remain the invisible muscle of globalization. Look at the numbers. The International Energy Agency's 2025 outlook projects global oil demand to exceed 104 million barrels per day, the highest in history. Even as renewable investments hit top levels, the world burned more crude than ever. Emerging economies need crude for growth. Developed ones need it for stability. Oil has become less of a villain and more of an inconvenient friend, the one you wish you could quit but still call when the lights flicker. So, why does this gap between aspiration and action persist? Partly because energy transitions are never about technology alone. They are about power, politics, and psychology. Governments want cheap fuel and clean reputations. Companies want to appear sustainable while protecting decades-old supply chains. Consumers want electric cars, but don't want expensive electricity. Everyone negotiating with their moral values and self-interest. For example, producers are doubling down. The US quietly remains the world's top oil and gas exporter. Saudi Aramco just reported another quarter of triple-digit billion in profit. ADNOC is investing simultaneously in carbon capture and new offshore rings. And Russia, sanctioned, shadow-traded, and yet resilient, keeps redirecting barrels east, reshaping global routes in the process. All this leads to a post-climate week paradox. We talk about the end of oil, but every policy designed to reduce it somehow straightens its grip. Subsidies for renewables push up natural gas demand as a transitional fuel. Sanctions create premium markets for those willing to take risks. The harder the world tries to move away, the more elastic the system becomes. If the world of oil had a stage, OPEC Plus would be its long-running theater. Part drama, part strategy, part soap opera. And every act opens the same way. The world worries about prices. Ministers gather in Austria or Saudi Arabia and cameras wait for a single line. We have decided to adjust production. That's one sentence could move trillions of dollars. Formally, OPEC Plus is a coalition of 23 nations led by Saudi Arabia and Russia. But informally, it's a masterclass in controlled chaos. The group was born in 2016 when the original OPEC members realized that traditional oil diplomacy was no longer enough. The US shale boom had changed the mass. Prices were relative, budgets were bleeding, and producers needed a way to coordinate without appearing desperate. Thus, OPEC Plus was born, a blend of Middle Eastern monarchies, and post-Soviet pragmatics, each with its own agenda but bound by a shared addiction to revenue. Now, fast forward to October 2025. Nowadays, as ministers prepare for the fall meetings, the stakes feel higher than ever. Prices are near $90 per barrel, high enough to please producers but risky for global inflation. Saudi Arabia, the de facto leader, wants stability. Russia wants cash flow. The smaller members just want attention. So behind the headlines, three stories are slowly revealing themselves. First, Saudi Arabia, still the world's swing producer, continues its balancing act between Washington and Beijing. Aramco's profits remain astronomical, but capital's ambitions have shifted. Under Vision 2030, the kingdom wants to reinvent itself beyond oil, investing in tourism, sport, and green tech. Yet none of it possible without the black gold still flowing beneath its sand. Each voluntary production cut is both an act of market discipline and a message to the world: we are in control. Second, Russia. Navigating sanctions and shadow fleets has turned oil trading into a geopolitical chessboard. Its crude finds new homes in India, China, and smaller Asian refiners. Discounted barrels still generate billions, financing both budgets and influence. Despite Western effort to isolate Moscow, OPEC Plus provides Russia with a diplomatic stage and a sense of legitimacy. As many analysts have noted, every OPEC Plus meeting is a Moscow reminder that it still has a seat at the grown-up table. And third, newcomers. The UAE's ADNOC has mastered the art of dual messaging, championing sustainability while quietly increasing capacity. Nigeria and Angola struggle with underinvestment, yet remaining critical for African supply routes. Even non-members like Guyana now orbit the OPEC Plus ecosystem, changing power maps once dominated by the West. The geopolitics of oil at its core is about risk production, consumption, restraint, and release. OPEC Plus members understand that scarcity is not just an economic tool, it's a diplomatic one. A well-timed cut can straighten alliances, influence elections, and shift investment flow. Meanwhile, United States, technically outside the group but deeply affected by it, plays its own ironic role. It's now the largest oil producer in the world, yet still watched OPEC Plus meetings as it waiting for a weather forecast. Shale producers respond faster than bureaucrats, but even they can't outplay global sentiment. So, as the ministers gather again this October, the world will listen for clues. Will Saudi Arabia extend its voluntary cuts? Will Russia push for higher quotas? Will the group signal unity or fracture under pressure? Whatever happens behind closed doors, one thing is certain. OPEC Plus still holds the world's pulse in its hands. And every headline about coordinated output decisions is really a story about who gets to define the next chapter of global power. Well, if you listen closely, you can hear the cognitive dissonance in the air. Governments speak the language of the energy transition, but act in the dialect of energy security. The words have changed. Behavior has not. Europe offers the clearest example. After the shock of the Ukraine war, the continent vowed to never again depend on Russian energy, and technically it has not, at least not on Russian energy, but dependence itself never left. It simply changed its accent. LNG terminals are multiplying, The US tankers now are in ports in Europe, like from Rotterdam to other ports. Nearly half of Europe's imported LNG now comes from the United States. Meanwhile, in Asia, demand tells a different story. India's oil consumption just hit a record high. China, even as it leads the world in solar and EV production, quietly increased its coal output and refined oil imports. For all the talks of renewables, both economies run on a hybrid model. Green ambition powered by black fuel. And then there's the Middle East, where the supposed sunset industry is funding a sunrise of influence, speaking metaphorically. The Gulf states have turned oil wells into diversification engines. Saudi Arabia is investing billions into green hydrogen and futuristic cities. The United Arab Emirates is branding itself as sustainability hub. But those dreams are paid for by every exported barrel. ADNOC's carbon capture announcements make headlines, but its drilling rigs hum steadily in the background. This is the real face of the energy transition. Not a clean break, but a complex negotiation. Every government is trying to draw the line between idealism and realism, and every company is rebranding itself accordingly. For example, ExxonMobil calls it low-carbon solutions. Total Energies talk about balanced growth. Shell uses the phrase orderly transition. All different words of the same truth. They are not exiting fossil fuels. They are evolving. How they sell them? Just think about it. Even the clean economy is becoming energy hungry. We already all learned that AI data centers, the new digital factories, now consume more electricity than some small countries. Manufacturing solar panels, batteries, and wind turbines require steel, aluminum, rare metals, all mined, refined, and transported by oil-powered supply chains. And in other words, the world is electrifying, but oil is still the lubricant of globalization and electrification. The International Monetary Fund recently described this period as an energy duality, two systems coexisting, the old and one new, with each depending on the other more than they can admit or won't admit. If oil disappeared tomorrow, renewables couldn't yet fill the gap. But if oil stayed dominant forever, the planet couldn't handle the cost. And through all this, trade becomes the quiet battlefield. Tankers are rerouted, subsidies rewritten, alliances redrawn. Energy has always been about power, but now that power is split between electrons and hydrocarbons, a tension shaping the next decade of global politics. And one more truth, the transition isn't a straight line. It's a circus. Feedback loops, contradictions, and course correction. Each step forward depends on something we thought we left behind. If oil is the lifeblood of global trade, then the arteries are the routes it flows through. And lately, those arteries been under stress. Take the Red Sea. Once a stable corridor between Asia and Europe, it's now a high-tension zone. The Suez Canal, carrying roughly 12% of global trade, has become the world's most watched checkpoint. A single drone strike or shipping delay can ripple through entire supply chains, raising freight rates, insurance costs, and inflation indexes. The Straits of Hormuz, where 1/5 of the world oil passes each day, or like 20% of oil passes each day, remains a geopolitical pressure valve. Every naval exercise, every regional skirmish sends oil futures on a roller coaster. Even in a world obsessed with digital currencies and AI models, the movement of real barrels through narrow water still defines global economics. And yet, while headlines focus on these hot spots, other changes is happening elsewhere. For example, Africa and Latin America are emerging as the new frontiers of oil geography. Offshore discoveries in Namibia, Guyana, Mozambique are redrawing investments map. And for producers in the global south, oil is not burden of the past. It's a ticket to development, industrialization, and influence. At the same time, new players are joining the game. Brazil's Petrobras is exporting record volumes. Mexico is reviving its refining sector. And in the United States, the Gulf Coast has become both a petrochemical hub and climate paradox, a region exporting liquefied natural gas while rebuilding after hurricanes intensified by warming seas. All of it adds up to a strange equilibrium. Even as the world invests in renewables, oil remains the gravitational center of trade diplomacy. Sanctions, carbon pricing, and green regulations haven't removed it from the equation. They have just made it more strategic. The oil barrel is no longer just an energy unit. It's a geopolitical token. Actually, it's always been, but today we can see it from quite a different angle. What's next? Probably a deeper integration between oil and carbon markets. In episode 17, we talked about how pollution itself became tradable. If you haven't listened to episode 17, I would highly recommend to do so. But returning to our discussion topic about oil and carbon markets, the next evolution might be even stranger. Oil that comes with built-in carbon offsets, crude branded as responsibly extracted. Let me repeat it, responsibly extracted, like a new label. So if this will happen, I will request a credit for the idea. And we have already seen a glimpse. Middle East sovereign funds are investing in renewable projects, not just for energy, but for the optics. Western majors are rebranding as energy companies while still drilling in the same field. Traders are blending crude grades with digital certificates to market them as lower carbon. What we see here, from cargo ships crossing the Pacific to AI data centers in Virginia, from fertilizers plants in India to EV factories in China, oil is still silent enabler. So, the story today isn't about whether oil will end. It's about how long the world can pretend it has. After climate summits and corporate pledges, after OPEC Plus meetings and green transition plans, the reality stands unchanged. The global economy still runs on what is publicly denied: legacy fuels. But maybe that is not hypocrisy, maybe it's evolution. Transitions are messy, and the real shift often happens not when the old system disappears, but when the new one learns to live with it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your colleagues and friends who are liking to discuss global trade topics. And as always, thank you for joining me on Circus and Circuit, Unraveling Global Trade podcast. I'm Kate Foronda, and until next time, stay curious and stay informed.